I'm always curious about action cameras, and this one got my attention because it claims to shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, which puts it up to par with GoPro Hero 7 Black, with E4K Plus, and the SJ8 Pro at a much lower price. And I'm vlogging this with the Campark X30, recording with an external microphone, so if you're thinking the quality is superb, go check about that. And what I want to find out is, do we really get what we pay for? Because this one costs only between $100 and $120. Let's get to the bottom of this. A little bit of research made me notice that the team behind Campark is also known for their other brand, GMAC, and both brands are mostly manufacturing camera-related gear. In this review, we will explore the three main sections: hardware, the software, including navigation and features, and of course the video performance. And in between, we will review a lot of additional components. A pool of mounts, most of which pretty useful, are included in the original package. The box feels rather cheap, and in my opinion, choosing a black nuance for a black colored device doesn't make it appealing, but if it is well financially justified, doesn't really bother. There are lots of mounts included. You can easily attach it on a bike, or helmet, or standard tripod, or swim with it underwater with a waterproof case. I can only recommend getting a decent flexible tripod, and I have recently packed some of the most useful accessories for GoPro-like cameras in a separate video. You can also find links to a chest strap and a head strap in the description right below this video. 2 batteries are included with this one, and that's a great deal. Furthermore, they seem to be the same as the batteries that are widely used in Eken's cameras, which means that spares are not only easy to find but also rather cheap. When you're choosing an action camera, most likely you will first ask about the price, maybe about the features, and perhaps about the accessories. On the other side, what grabbed my attention the most, besides the 60 frames per second, is the hardware. Allwinner V5 chipset. Quite unusual. It is accompanied by a SONY IMX 386 sensor, touchscreen, and 1350 mAh battery, which is supposed to deliver the good autonomy time. Good choice of a sensor. It is 12 megapixel and should deliver a decent quality. Same sensor was used by Xiaomi for their Mi Max 2 model back in 2017. The chipset, however, let's see the specs together. There are some good news: H.265 encoding support, artificial intelligence engine-based architecture, good amount of processing power, but it's nowhere mentioned about 60 frames per second. It says 4K at 30 FPS maximum, and if you so far have the bitter expectation that 4K at 60 FPS is interpolated, you will be right, because it is, quite unfortunately. It simply is 4K at 30 frames per second with doubled frames, and is certainly the first big disappointment here. Although it is 2019, most people are still happy enough with just 1080p, and 4K at 30 frames per second often sounds like a premium option, so I don't think that people would have disliked the camera if it was righteously marketed as just a 4K action camera. Anyways, let's carry on. There is electronic image stabilization, and it works well for most of the resolutions, however is far away from what GoPro or even the SJ8 Pro can offer. The 170-degree wide-angle glass adds a lot of fisheye feeling, and especially if you have dynamic movements going up and down, it feels quite bad. Luckily, there's a distortion correction feature. Sadly, it won't work together with stabilization, so a good solution to this situation is to add a gimbal. I'm lately testing the Feiyutech G6 Plus, and if you have any questions about it, Let me know and I will cover them in the forthcoming video. Let's go now for the software related part. It is in fact wonderful. I appreciate a lot the first time setup wizard, something which you don't see too often. And this is great chance to educate a person using it for the first time about the functions. The English menu wording can be improved a lot though. Overall, this navigation reminds a lot the Firefly 8 SE menu options. From the bottom there's quick access to most shooting modes. There are 4 different video and 4 different photo modes. Each of them has settings to be adjusted, and I have to say that each of the settings for these menus is reachable within just seconds. Except if you have to change the settings on a very bright day, as the display will be barely visible. Changing the modes can also be done via the buttons, and that can be a great help, especially if you're shooting underwater. I have tested most of the video settings and have only explored the single photo shots, most of the time problem-free. While the navigation is simply wonderful and the menu options are so many that you may feel at some point that you will get lost, some of them are not as great as we want them to be. ISO 6400, for example, is supposed to mean that even complete darkness will show some details, although grainy, but the reality is that no matter what you do, the night videos and photos will look rather too dark. On the other side, something awesome and nice to finally see again when reviewing an action camera, the long exposure function. It opens the shutter for a defined by you period of time, and this enables you to create night art photography if you use your imagination, or you can turn complete darkness into not too bad looking scene. For achieving better results, highly recommended are the use of a smartphone app and a tripod so that the camera remains in a still condition. Now, there is one problem that I have experienced, mostly because of the use of a cheap micro SD. There's a great chance, if you encounter a freeze condition, your whole micro SD to become corrupt. I got exactly this situation twice, and files were quite difficult to recover, but managed to do so thanks to 2 softwares, Recover It by Wondershare and Recuva, which is freeware. But in any case, make sure to go for a decent U3 card in order to avoid any possible complications, because at the end of the day it was my own fault. There also seems to be some weird thing about the 4K codec, showing resolution of 3200 by 1800, which is definitely very weird and coming on top of the fake 60 frames per second output in 4K. This leads us to the third major part of this review, the image quality. The only real 4K samples seems to be time-lapse cuts, as everything else was not a true 4K. And I say weird because both the sensor and the processor support Ultra HD resolution even at just 30 frames per second. In daylight, the recordings are rather good, colors are balanced, dynamic range is well, white balance is fine. Because of the non-spherical lenses, the fisheye effect is quite visible and annoying, and almost impossible to fix even with good post-production plugins. And as we said, if you want properly looking shapes, you can use distortion correction without image stabilization function on. Bitrate is good. Extremely high at 1080p 30 frames per second, about 30 megabit and about 53 for 60 frames per second in Full HD. To prove the point about the faked so-called 4K, 30 FPS has 65 megabit and 60 only 44 megabits. Coincidence? I truly doubt that. For the time of using the X30, I have mostly positive impressions. Battery life is in fact great, often beyond 40 minutes of mixed usage, so a non-stop recording will easily make it to more than an hour. The Wi-Fi smartphone app has often been very helpful. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with the X30, and as soon as Campark release a firmware update removing the useless faked 4K at 60 FPS, and bringing 4K to a proper real resolution, this model can become quite attractive for only $100. Right now, I can barely call it a native 4K camera. The hardware can well support that, and Campark are that close to making the X30 model a really great one. So, what do you think about the video quality? Good, bad, acceptable? I don't know, you can tell me in the comment section below. And we are approaching the end. You have the chance to see a lot of different environments, scenarios, lighting conditions and so on. So you make up your mind, I guess, and also you were able to see a lot of side-by-side comparisons, which are quite useful if you have your doubts between 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever action cameras. And that's gonna be most about this episode, and because these videos are taking a lot of effort, time and passion, maybe you can help me a bit, like subscribing, liking or disliking respectfully, sharing with friends. You know, let's make sure that this work is going to reach as many people as possible, because at the end of the day it could be fun and useful, so that you can pick the right action camera for you. My name is Michael, that's the Tech4O channel, and I'm really looking forward to see you again in the next episode. And now, enjoy your day. See ya!